Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland off today. Joining me now, the executive editor of the American Prospect, the co-host of the podcast Organized Money, and also, most importantly for right now, the host of Prospect's Weekly Roundup, which we are simulcasting as we speak.
Indeed. Your efforts to crush our tiny little show have not succeeded. I just
We've
want to say that.
subsumed you. It's like
it's weird that you think you can control time. Like you're not allowed to have another progressive show the 15 hours a day that you post these
We
things.
are only on for 3 hours a day.
You're like Johnny Carson of the progressive blogging community here. Why did you call me and say I can't have a guest on 30 days before or 10 days after your show?
It was actually supposed to be 30 days after. 30 and 30. That's the way we operate around here.
30 and 30 is the way you do it?
Yeah, that's the way we do it. That actually, you're joking, but there have been people in this space who got very, very upset just about people having a guest on.
Oh, that's an old Carson thing, right? He would tell the Letterman, like, you can't have the same guest on.
Yeah. Well, we don't have that policy here. So it's great to see you.
You're a ruthless dictator, but thank you for having me. This is, I should say, we do a little 1 hour roundup on Friday afternoons from 12:30 to 1:30 usually. And we take questions in our YouTube chat. So questions might come out.
Great.
As we're talking about this, I'll bring them to you. I'm happy to be here. I mean, I don't get to do the Fridays.
Well, that's why I've asked you to move. That's the only reason why I asked you to move it to
that's why I demanded
start it at 1:30. That way you can come on this show first.
Demanding that we change the time. That was weird. I thought we were friends, but anyway, let's move on.
That's why I had my lawyer do it, and I didn't want it to impact our relationship.
You can't see the lawyer imperiously standing over me right now, forcing me to do this show, but I'm very happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad that we, of course, we did the same thing with our law firm where they have to give us $100 million worth of pro bono work. But
that's right.
All right.
That's right.
Let's get into this. You wrote a couple of pieces. Well, there's two pieces I wanted to talk to you about. It's the last two pieces you've written, frankly, because it's basically what we've been talking about. The most recent one, no personnel is policy, is what we've been talking about here for months, since the inauguration, essentially. But let's start with the piece you wrote yesterday about the tariffs. We just played a clip of Scott Bessent, or Besant, as I like to call him, whose explanation of the tariffs was something to the effect of, like, our federal debt is out of control. I guess the implication being that we're going to raise so much money from tariffs that we're going to pay money, that our federal debt is so out of control that we're probably headed for a crash. And the way that you know it is because things were going well, and that often the crashes happen.
There are only two states of being: going well or crash. And so he is correct. It has to be true that you're going well before the crash.
It's literally like saying, I've studied car crashes, and every time before a car crash, a car was moving. So
that's right. As night follows day, crash follows good times.
And people are out there trying to, first of all, like, we had the media saying these are reciprocal tariffs. They're not. The numbers that were presented really are not tariffs that are levied on the U.S. It was, they took the goods, the trade deficit that we had with any other country. They divided that by the amount of goods. They didn't count services, which should be included within the context of trade calculations, and then just came up with a new number that they said was a tariff, and then we imposed that tariff, and they're called reciprocal.
It's even worse than that, because the numbers that they use display a surplus to places like like a trade surplus with the Netherlands and Hong Kong and Singapore, and that's only because they have ports. That's the reason that there's an alleged surplus of goods coming in from the U.S. to those countries, because they literally land in those countries before going out to the rest of the world. That's how they
I was reading that they sort of plugged it into like Grok or something and tried to, I mean, that's...
There are several AI chatbots where if you ask them what's an easy way to do tariffs, this is their answer.
So they've levied these tariffs. They're going to start. Give us your take on what these are, because they're not really. I mean, you have written extensively, as well and as accessibly as anybody I know, about the Biden administration's industrial policy moves through the IRA, through the CHIPS Act,
right,
and to some extent to the American Rescue Act, where they're trying to build an industry in this country. And
by the way, those did include tariffs. There were targeted tariffs on China. There were also some targeted tariffs on steel and aluminum. Some of them were carried over from the first Trump administration, and they were paired with an actual industrial strategy that allows for a transition, because factories aren't magically, conjured up overnight to deal with a tariff situation. They offer incentives to build. They are targeted at specific critical industries that are seen as advantageous for the country. And that pairing was wildly successful. We actually cracked this code during the Biden administration. Manufacturing construction, I should say, the building of plants and facilities went through the roof after 2022's passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. Those factories are starting to come online. The top 5 semiconductor makers in the world all have locations in the United States, the only country in the world where that's the case. And we were on our way. And we ran this thing from Joe Biden, if you remember, at the end of his term. It's kind of saying this is this is a hinge point, is basically what he said at the end. If we follow my policies, we're going to have this strategy be fully realized. Whoops.
I mean, not only did Trump just issue tariffs that have nothing to do with anything, really. I mean, but he also started to attack the chips, the programs from the chips in the IRA, just because. Yeah. Because.
I mean, the funny thing is that because the CHIPS Act is new, it came out in 2022, and they didn't start hiring, the people who would run the program office that would determine who gets funds and monitor the progress. They didn't start hiring those people until maybe 2023, 2024. Large numbers of that office were probationary employees, and they all got fired at the beginning when the probationary employees were fired. So something like 2/5 of the entire CHIPS office was fired.
Great. That's good news.
Good to know.
Okay. So his tariffs, so Trump's tariffs, are not part of an industrial policy. They almost don't even, some people try and sell it that way. It seems like in the administration, they also sell it as Trump seems to sell it as a revenue generator, but this is the equivalent of saying, like, when in New York City, they raised cigarette taxes by like $10. And so a pack of cigarettes now costs like $25. The idea was to discourage smoking. If you raised a ton of money from this, your policy agenda failed because you didn't discourage smoking. That would, the analogy in this would be, you'd create industry.
Any kind of Govian tax, which is the term for a tax on something you want less of, that you want to discourage, you cannot use those to rely, those cannot be the basis for your entire revenue collection system. Because if you want less of them, you're going to get less of them if it succeeds, which means you're not going to be able to fund your country.
And it also means that there's going to be a lot of inflation, because not just because those products themselves are expensive, but if I'm paying 25% more for a shirt made in 54% more for a shirt made in China, U.S. shirt makers are going to say, like, we got a little bit of wiggle room here to raise our prices.
Well, just to be clear, you're not going to pay 54% more on a shirt because of these tariffs. These are tariffs on the cost of an import at wholesale rates, a wholesale value. And then there's a markup attached to that, and then it goes out to retail. It's going to be far less than that in terms of what the American consumer feels. It's still going to be significant, but it's not going to be a 54% increase in shirt.
Well, we can calculate it this way. If they think that it's going to raise $600 billion a year, that's $5,000 per household in this country.
You can absolutely use that as a benchmark if you think, in fact, that there won't be retaliatory tariffs, if you don't think there will be lower volume. I don't think there's any reason to believe Peter Navarro's back of the envelope claim about $600 billion a year. It's still going to be significant, obviously. And when you do these across the board, you're putting tariffs on things that we don't have the capacity to build in this country, that we can't build because of our climate. You can't grow bananas at scale in this country.
Okay.
Unless you basically clear cut Hawaii and turn it into a banana plant. That's about the only way you can do it.
I just did an ad for Fast Growing Trees. People can grow their own avocados in their apartment. So
I was told about that.
Yeah.
Do we get a cut of that now because we simulcast that ad?
You'll get an avocado.
We'll get some.
Which will be probably far greater.
I'll ask the lawyer that's here that's forcing me to do this show.
But the idea being that there is a lot of products that we wouldn't even want to try and build the industry in this country because we don't have. It's just simply not. I don't know. Like, our lumber industry is about as big as it's going to get. We don't have the forest that Canada has.
And more to the point, it's a question of time, right? So there is a world in which tariffs and incentives can create a situation where we have a successful reindustrialization strategy, but it takes probably 3-4 years to build those factories, and imposing the tariffs immediately and not phasing them in, it's going to create this near-term economic pain. The truth is that we have an economy that's too financialized. It's based on services primarily. We've hollowed out our industrial base to the extent that it's somewhat of a national security problem. All of these are true, but we actually figured out how to deal with that.
Right. It's an industrial policy, which tariffs is a part of. This blanket tariffs is exactly not how you would do it, it seems to me.
But we were getting to the point, which is, I don't think it's even worth calling these tariffs. They're illegitimately derived. They are nonsensical in their execution. One thing to look out for, by the way, is that the implementation of this is going to be a mess. We don't have enough customs officials to implement these tariffs, to know everything on the schedule. And there's going to be a huge backup at the ports next week, is what I'm thinking. But anyway, let's set all that aside. These aren't tariffs. They are attempts to gain leverage over every country in the world, because this is the way Donald Trump operates. He has imposed a cost on every country, even ones only inhabited by penguins. And he is saying to the rest of the world, come at me, tell me what you'll give me in order for me to lift this economic pain off your country. And that may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen next week. But he thinks it's going to happen. The question is, is the United States indispensable enough that if the rest of the world kind of gangs up against them, will this actually play out? But I'm saying what's in Trump's mind is that he is a mob boss who goes to Main Street and kicks in the door and says, it's going to be a problem for you if you don't pay me protection money. And I'll give you a couple days to think about this, but you're going to have to come up with a way to. I run this street now, and you're going to have to come up with a way to figure out how to compensate me. That's what's going on. That's his mentality.
Yeah, I think that's accurate, and a good friend of the show, Guy Lawson, who has written a lot about the mobs. He said very early on, he said, if you want to know how this is going to work, look at the way that organized crime is structured. But here's the thing that is unclear. What is it that what's the ask? I get it when the mob boss comes busted in through the door in your laundromat and says, "Hey, this place could burn down if I don't get $150 a week or whatever it is." What is he asking for of the the Canary Islands?
I think it could be a number of different asks, and they could be geopolitical in nature. We want you to protect our interests abroad. They could be very specific, like there's a company here that you're not letting in our cars, and you need to let in our cars. So there could be a corrupt version of this where it's just forcing markets open for favored businesses.
Right.
It could be personal. It could be give me $1 billion. I wouldn't put that past Donald Trump. It could be a number of things. And there's optionality to it in Trump's mind. If you look at Besant, I wrote this 6 months ago, actually. If you look at Besant and what he actually believes, there was this great interview where he talks about putting every country in the world into a box. And the box is either red, yellow, or green. And the green box means you don't have any tariffs, or you have very low tariffs, or something like that. The yellow box is you're doing something we don't like, whatever that is, and we're going to put a higher tariff on you because you're in the yellow box. And the red box is even worse. That's we're going to really mess with your economy. And you can negotiate with us to move boxes, to move into the yellow box, move into the green box. But this is where we're going to situate you right now. And I see Liberation Day as the moving of countries into boxes. And now we'll see if they can climb their way out of them.
If the countries decide to climb their way out of them, or basically just say, we will start to reorient in a different direction.
Right. That'll take time and it'll be painful. Or, the shortcut to that is, oh yeah, you put tariffs on us, we'll put tariffs on you. And that becomes a trade war, which is really bad for citizens, but it's kind of a geopolitical power play, and we're caught up in it.
We're seeing that supposedly. I think it just was breaking this morning that China is issuing tariffs against it, and then we're going to see this with the farmers. And so, are we going to just see? We just start to see the Trump administration now bail out the different industries that are to shore up like our end of this trade war. And
well, he did that. He did that in his first term.
Right.
He used a Roosevelt era program to just give cash to farmers who were having various difficulties, particularly during COVID. He just gave like $60 billion to farmers using a Roosevelt program. It was a wild thing that was vastly underreported. I have a question from our chat, actually.
Sure.
From Jared. He's asked, how is the de minimis loophole changing? Which this is actually a really interesting part of this whole thing. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but right now, 1 billion products a year come into this country, most of them from China, most of them from e-commerce companies in China like Shein and Temu, under what is known as the de minimis loophole. And a de minimis package is characterized in this country as a package under $600. Used to be far less than that, but there was a law that was changed about 10 years ago, I believe, to raise the threshold of de minimis. Those packages come in without tariffs, without any kind of inspection. And it is a way that we have accelerated this sort of e-commerce drop shipping direct from China to a consumer. And they come in at a lower mail rate too, which is actually kind of fun. So none of this is reflected in the balance of trade, by the way. So, whatever our trade deficit is, multiply it by 1 billion packages, which are allegedly under $600. We don't know what's in the packages because we don't inspect them, but they're valued at less than $600. I don't know that anything is going to change with that. There was a fake crackdown that Trump did on de minimis packages about a month ago. But because of the way in which it was structured, it doesn't really change anything. And in fact, what we saw, I just talked about how the ports got clogged or where they might get clogged next week. They tried to change the de minimis loophole wholesale and say, nope, everything's got to be inspected. Everything's got to be checked for a tariff. And within 2 days, there were like 1 million de minimis packages at the ports. And they said, forget that, just let them go. And so I don't know that this changes that. And in fact, that might be an arbitrage strategy. There are countries that might say, oh, okay, so if I give you $1 million order, that's going to be tariff. But if I give you $10,500 orders, that's not.
So we're yet to see how people are going to react to this. Businesses, I mean, is there, like, let's say Trump starts to hand out waivers here and there, because that also feels like what people have anticipated to get either the personal favors or whatever. Everybody comes. Laura Loomer comes in and says, she wanted, a villa somewhere, and maybe, I don't know.
It's not an if, by the way. The American Petroleum Institute came out the day of Liberation Day and said, hey, thank you, Donald Trump, for not including oil and gas.
Right. And he said that he went in front of them and said, give me $1 billion and I'll save you guys. And so bingo.
And he did.
Yep.
And he did.
What about like the implications of this on the economy, in the sense that, like, it feels like there's a lot of companies who are not going to be able to curry favor with Trump. Maybe every country will and whatnot, and maybe there won't be a trade war. That's like all, I guess, theoretically the best case scenario. But you have like the entire country sort of going, I'm hitting pause on everything right now. Like, I'm not going to buy a car. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that.
In fact, I'd say two things. First of all, we actually saw a surge in that kind of durable goods purchases in March.
So people, so buying in anticipation.
Yeah, there was a lot of moving forward. In fact, we had a decent jobs report here in March, and I would say that at least part of that is because consumer spending was probably higher than anticipated in March, because people were expecting Liberation Day to come down the pipe. So that's number one. Number two, the best case scenario is actually this. The best case scenario is that Congress recognizes that they actually have the power to stop this. There is no inherent tariff power in the hands of the president. It's all been delegated under these emergency laws. And
wasn't it
like
delegated also through the dirty continuing resolution? Didn't that also sort of like
there was a question of whether or not in the continuing resolution, at least in the House, whether or not they could disapprove of certain tariffs or things like that. But rules are made to be broken. I mean, you can't really bind a future Congress. You can't bind
but
Congress.
They did it as a political matter to give them cover.
They did. But the Senate already the same day as Trump announced these tariffs, the Senate disapproved of the emergency declaration that was put on Canada for various Canadian tariffs. And that passed the Senate, the Republican-led Senate, 51-47, with 4 Republicans joining all the Democrats. And I think, if this gets really bad, and, judging from where we're at with stock markets and expectations of layoffs and things like that, it really could. I think that Republicans might go ahead and think about, making some changes here. And they have every power to do that. And so that would be the best case scenario for a couple of reasons. The biggest one would be sort of the end of this assumed dictatorial regime that we've seen over the last several months. And certainly Republicans have every political reason to defy the president on this. I mean, especially if they do it in numbers. He can't do 150 primary campaigns or however many. If they do it in sufficient numbers, it kind of ends the sort of luster of the president as the only policy-making individual in the government.
And I would imagine too, after Wisconsin, the incentive structure or the threshold window has changed a little bit for some of these Republicans, because the threat of Musk and Trump seems at least somewhat diminished, at least during the midterms and whatnot. Would the president Would the president have to sign any type of legislation that came out of the House and the Senate to curb his tariffs, or no?
Sure, but when you're talking about something that every Democrat is going to pass, and that Republicans will realize, well, there's only safety in numbers, then that 2/3 veto override threshold starts to become attractive.
Let's talk about, I mean, I don't know, Wisconsin on some level in particular, and also what we saw in Florida, for the most part, speak for themselves. I mean, these are huge gains in these Florida districts. Not that there's ever going to be a time where a Democrat's going to control them, but consistent with what we saw in that Pennsylvania special election, consistent with what we saw in this Wisconsin election. That is, even with Musk generating, and it wasn't even so much his money, although that was a big part of it, but the earned media he had by giving away, like doing a lot of bribery. I don't know what you would call that for somebody who had voted. How much are we going to see? Like, what are the implications of that going to be? And then I want to also talk about the budget resolution, the reconciliation bill.
Oh, great. Well, first of all, I can't believe we're talking about politics. I can't believe we're 25 minutes into the show and you haven't mentioned the poll showing AOC beating Chuck Schumer.
I headlined with that. I headlined with that. I headlined with that at the beginning of the show. Are you kidding?
Because that's your favorite thing.
No, I have that. I have that poll tattooed, like right
already.
Underneath my.
You got it real quick.
Yeah, I got it tattooed right underneath here.
Nice. We won't look at that. So
no, not on the simulcast. We're not giving away that for free.
No, hey, this is a family weekly roundup we have here. Okay, so yeah, I mean, look at the aggregate swing of these special elections relative to the 2024 general election baseline. You look at the ones in Florida and maybe the statewide race in Wisconsin, you're talking about something anywhere between 12 and even 22 points, yep. I think is the number. So, let's say it's even half that. Like let's say it's half of the midpoint of that. You got an 8-point swing or a 6, 7, 8 point swing, something like that. That puts like 60 House seats in play immediately. Maybe 100 if it's a swing that's closer to what we saw in these elections. And so that's got to weigh on the minds of a non-trivial number of Republican House members. It certainly looks like the more Musk earned media there was, the worse he did. There were 2 statewide elections in Wisconsin. One that got all the attention, the state Supreme Court race, and one that got no attention and no money.
Voter
and that
ID.
was the state. No. There was another statewide individual race. It was the state superintendent of public instruction race. And
I was not following that one.
Right. So that one was kind of a normal midterm swing where the woman won by 5 points, the Democrat. She was an incumbent, and she won by something like 5 points. And that had no attention. The one where Musk gave it all the attention, state Supreme Court, the Democrat wins by 10 points.
Right.
So Musk is literally a negative factor on the outcomes for his favored candidates. And he has said he's not going anywhere, and he's going to double down and continue to spend. And Democrats across the country are saying, thank God for that, because it seems like the more exposure there is on a political level to Elon Musk, the worse his candidates do.
And that's why there's been all those ketamine care packages being sent to D.C.
Indeed.
Get
care of the executive office building. Yeah.
You got to keep Elon Musk fueled to head out these elections. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.